to Sagas and Sass Season 4, brought to you by Geek Saga Entertainment. I'm Tara, along with fellow host Jonathan and practically permanent guest host Seth. This episode will cover Conquer, Part 3 of Golden Sun, the second installment in Pierce Brown's Red Rising saga.
Please note that if you are watching this as a webcast, there is a chance you will hear some minor spoilers for future books in the Red Rising series during our live webcast. However, if you are listening to this as a podcast, any spoilery bits have been edited out. If you're watching live, join us in the chat or after the fact. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Sagas and Sass, or email us at sagasandsass@gmail.com to continue the conversation. Additionally, please note that the views expressed in this show are those of the hosts as individuals and do not necessarily represent the show as a whole.
And don't forget that we now have a Patreon with 10 tiers ranging from $1 a month to $40 a month. It offers tons of ways to support us and receive some great perks in return. You can check it out at patreon.com/geeksaga_entertainment. And now, let's get into chapters 25 through 29 from part 3 of Golden Sun. Darrow and friends might have escaped from Luna and captured a VIS, very important ship, that is. But it turns out that it only takes a short amount of time for a good bit of Darrow's work to be undone. A month, in fact, and the Arch-Governor is already whining about how they are undone. Why, you ask? Well, because Nero is surrounded by foolish sycophants, of course, and they squeeze out anyone they think might quote-unquote steal even the tiniest bit of their power. But hey, don't worry. Darrow and Mustang have a plan. And even though the Telemanuses don't seem to have inside knowledge of it, it's a good thing they're around because Kavak's and Daxo's input certainly lends a hand to what Darrow and Mustang are trying to accomplish. That being to bring the families of the Rim into their fold because while commerce binds them to Luna, they hate the Sovereign due to her Ash Lord's, destruction of Rayavia nuke. However, because of that destruction, those same families will not easily join the Arch-Governor's alliance. But that's okay because Darrow wants to steal not just the Moonbreaker flagship they've been building on Ganymede, but all of their ships. And here's where Mustang plays her part, that being to question Darrow's sanity. All nasty comments by her father and Pliny aside, her questions and cautions do their job. Rather than make Augustus question Darrow's plan, they elicit a conversation that leads to the foregone conclusion. They win or they die. Oh, hey, Game of Thrones reference. So Pliny is outmaneuvered. Augustus decides to lead the raid on the shipyards of Ganymede. Mustang is ordered to take who and what she needs to basically kidnap the students from the galaxy's institutes, and everyone but Darrow is dismissed to go about their business, because Augustus has a special task for him. But first, Darrow has to reassure the boss man that he's not a Democrat with a K or a reformer. But when it comes down to whether or not Augustus can trust him, for once, Darrow plays a decent long game because he knows what Augustus needs him to do: win Lorne Arcos to their side.
When Darrow is finally able to leave Augustus, the Telemanuses are waiting in the hall to remind him that because of his friendship with Pax, they are and always will be his friends as well. And sure, it helps that just as Darrow is about to call in his first favor, Kavak's pet fox Sophocles miraculously finds jelly beans in Darrow's pocket. But really, they would have agreed to help Darrow anyway, though it seems we aren't going to learn how just yet. Most things are coming up Darrow again, with the exception of one. His friendship with Roke is severely damaged, and not about to be fixed anytime soon, as they're already setting a course for Europa, which means we basically just see Darrow jump from one Super Awk convo with Roke to the next Super Awk convo with Lorne. Seriously, all Lorne wants to do is chill out on Europa with his fam, and while he clearly has some love for Darrow, he kind of sort of really hates Augustus, and even tells Darrow all about his boss's history, which sure involves Augustus's whole family being murdered when he was just a kid, but also involves Augustus doing a not-so-subtle revenge murder of his first wife on their wedding night. On top of that, Lorne simply doesn't want to fight another dang war. But unfortunately for him, the Sovereign knew Darrow would go to Lorne for help and sent Aja and a Praetorian death squad to nip that bud. But by now we know Darrow and his plots and his plans within plots and plans, and of course this is another one of those situations. But how did the Sovereign know what Darrow's next step would be? Well, because Darrow made sure Pliny knew as much, and at this point everybody kind of knows that Pliny is a backstabbing little shit. So as Darrow promised Augustus, he isn't giving Lorne the option of refusal. The Howlers, including a good number of new recruits, were waiting in the ocean to take care of things. Darrow dropped landmine spikes throughout the garden as he and Lorne were talking, and while Aja is basically allowed to escape, the rest of the Praetorians are taken care of. With the exception of Tactus, because, oh yeah, he was given quite the promotion for his little stunt with Lysander, and it doesn't take Darrow and Lorne very long to figure out that he has been ordered to deal with, aka kill, Lorne's grandchildren.
Unfortunately for the Sovereign, Tactus might have been the only person left for this job, but he truly is the wrong person for it. As much as he wants to please his, let's be real, totally awful family, we learned not that long ago that while he might be an asshole, he's absolutely not a baby killer. So while he has found the children, he hasn't actually done the deed. By the time Darrow and Lorne arrive, and Darrow is heartbroken seeing Tactus's beautiful face marred by his bombs, and knowing how much his friend is hurting, how Tactus has been abused and manipulated, he offers him an out. I know there's good in you. You're not a monster. Come back to me, Darrow says, promising Tactus that he can be one of his lieutenants again. What happens next is nothing short of heartbreaking. Darrow reminds him that everyone makes mistakes, and Tactus says, I want to come home. Darrow tells him to come home, and they embrace. Tactus sobbing and apologizing. The children are escorted from the bunker, and eventually Lorne, Tactus, and Darrow are alone. At which point, Lorne simply looks at the two much younger men and says, now that the children are gone, consequences. He stabs Tactus, severing an artery to kill him, and then leaves without a word, leaving Darrow to hold his friend as he dies.
Lorne. We'll get into that in a bit. First, though, Darrow and Mustang playing the room at Augustus's little meeting of the minds is just it's just pure Darrow and Mustang. They're so good at this. They've always been so good at this, and every time it happens, as much as I'm about Darrow and love Mustang and think she can do better, I love them together a little more.
Okay, let's go back to that. Better with who?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I don't think that at this point in the books we've seen we would have to introduce a character
to be better.
to be better, because
in her mind, sure,
very limited.
Well, I'm not even. I'm talking about it in pretty much anyone's mind. It is a pretty low group of individuals that you could that would be marriageable material here.
Yeah, I mean,
at least in her circles.
That's true.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We'd have to introduce a new character. Exactly.
But yeah.
I think the only one possibly might be, and I get the two confused, would be Kevex, or I'm sorry, Kevex's son.
Daxo.
But I think he might be married, right? So
I don't know if he's married. I actually don't remember that, but I mean, he's too. Yeah, I don't think he's honest enough. He's like you. I don't want to get into it too much because spoilers.
Right.
But
we'll find some stuff out about him later that they wouldn't have gotten along that way.
Yeah, he's very political, and as Mustang is as well. But Mustang has a very like community focused political mind, whereas Daxo, I'm not sure, has that. I mean, you do see it some in his early appearances as well. Like Darrow sees that Daxo is playing little games, like slipping jelly beans into his pocket for Sophocles. Daxo absolutely did that in the scene between them after this little meeting. Well, not little meeting, big meeting of the minds. But I I like when Pliny is like, the Galileans doubt the validity of our cause, and Darrow just is like, we don't have a cause. This is about power. It's always about power. We fight because we attached ourselves to a star, the arch governor. But the star is fading. Oof. So like the TLDR of this meeting is that they kind of trick Pliny as they announce their plan to steal the ships from the docks at Ganymede, and fuck you, Pliny.
Yeah, no, it's true, and really fuck that guy. But this actually ties into what I was saying the last time I was here, is that the only reason you need iron golds is because there are other iron golds, right? They're not fighting for a cause, they're fighting for power because this faction is now challenging another faction. That's it.
Which is literally I mean, we get another story about that in this section, which again we'll get into in a little bit.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
But you know,
Grapes.
it's one of those things where in the first book they don't make it seem as if this they don't make it seem as if the fight between these families, and not just the Bolognas and the Augustuses, is really more than, oh, you know, Carnus killed the older Augustus son. I can't remember. Is Claudius, maybe? Claudius, was that
It
his
was,
name?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Uh he's unimportant at this point. But
Oh, yeah.
but we think that it's all about them, and then we learn at the beginning of this book, in part 2, when Darrow challenges Cassius, they have their duel, that after that happens, all these other houses are fighting amongst themselves, even though they weren't directly involved in that duel situation or in the Bologna versus Augustus house war. They're all fighting each other over other little, slights between their families. And, this is just another, like you said, I mean, yes, we only have iron golds because there are other iron golds, or we only need iron golds because there are other iron golds. But it's the tentacles of this like disease are, they've always, I mean, I can't say they're spreading, but our knowledge of it is, right.
Yeah.
It's not just these two families. It's like the upside down in Stranger Things, where it's like eating away.
Yeah, no, the rot. I mean, look, again, we've talked about I'm societies. I'm sorry, societies. I'm surprised that the society has lasted for as long as it did. It's completely unworkable. It is completely immoral. And any argument you could make, well, it was necessary in order to blah blah blah. My counter argument is pinks. I win. Sit down. Shut up.
Okay, let's take a step back amongst the why it lasted as long as it has. How is this society in this book that much different from Roman society, which was able to last, hundreds and hundreds of years, despite also treating their population at about the same level as
I
this?
don't necessarily know that I'd agree entirely with that.
I think it's supposed to be like a smaller picture of a lot of societies as a whole over history, right? Like, it's not just I don't know if I would even agree with it being the Romans, but I'm thinking like like the Russians, like the czars and the serfs, right? And then you've got like colonialism and slavery. It's a I I want to say smaller, but maybe in a way it's a bigger picture, because it's kind of all of the negatives of all these other societies combined, in that there's this one people that is above all, and they have subjugated everyone below them so much via literal like genetic manipulation and breeding and lack of technology for the low colors, that they have created what in the gold mind is perfection, at least
Yeah.
to a good portion of them.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, the
course, it's
closest
perfection
thing to the
gold.
colors that I think we have in what I would call semi-modern society, unfortunately, and Nami's not here to refute this, is the Indian caste system, right? I mean, where you definitely have a hierarchical caste with the Brahmins on top and the untouchables down at the bottom, and a bunch of people go starting from top to bottom in the middle. I mean,
if we're going semi-modern, I might make an argument for pre-revolutionary Russia.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Just in terms of and I will admit I am not terrifically familiar with Indian history much at all, except for some stuff I learned about very ancient Indian history. But I don't believe they have the at least they certainly don't now. I think that the sort of, not only am I above them, but I am allowed to do whatever I want with them, that we see here that did exist in pre-revolutionary Russia.
I really think like it's not really an argument because of one being a closer parallel than the other, because I think this is meant to be
Be
a conglomeration.
of
You could say that you could make the argument that it also reflects pre-communism Chinese society and history, right?
yeah.
And
It's
Pierce Brown, from what I have read both in these books about him and articles, listened to interviews, etc., he absolutely has done a fuck ton of research. So this society might be, sort of quote unquote based on Greco-Roman ideals, but I I think it has taken bits and pieces from all of our history. And honestly, I think that's kind of the most, like, the
But
saddest part about it is that we can say is that there is like a conversation between, like, well, which awful society is it closest to,
but
and it's
getting back,
all of them.
yeah, but getting back to the point of this society wouldn't have lasted this many years. I don't think there's any evidence to that. We've had plenty of horrific societies lasting hundreds and hundreds of years.
Here's why. It's not just because it's horrific, but to bring up the Romans again, they didn't have as many the existential threat is coming from inside the house problems
Mm.
in as relatively brief a term as these people seem to. Right? You had Marius and Sulla, which was the first big one. Then you had Caesar, and then from that you had Augustus and Octavian. So that there was a fairly long period where Rome society was unstable in terms of who was in charge. But all the Iron Golds do is look at what the other ones have and are jealous that they are not the very, very pinnacle of power. And all they do is fight each other. So the
But
people who are
isn't
supposed to be in charge are just fighting each other all the time.
but isn't that essentially what ancient Rome was? I mean, you had a series
No,
of people fighting each other
the
for
Republic
power.
worked for a long period of time. They were fighting other people, they were fighting other polities, but they weren't fighting in themselves as much as these people seem to.
And I don't know that any one. I don't know that any society really did. I mean, even I feel like this is a long, long, long discussion that we could have. I think the TLDR really is that, like I said, this is a conglomeration of all of the badness of history, like, or of societies in our history, and it seems different to us because they have all this technology, and they have, instead of it being just, monarchy and like some, maybe like a slightly lower class, and then a slightly like lower class, like a merchant class, and then like serfs, slaves, whatever. We've got, everybody is relegated to their own case, to their own color. Literally, they all look, they don't all look the same, but they all have the same eyes, or the same, like the same shade of hair, etc. So
Yeah.
it's just it's a genetically manipulated
There's
shithole
just
of history.
there's just no reason for it. My God, there's so little reason. Uh
Well, so they can tell everybody like apart. It's like automatic. Like, so a Pink can dress up fancy and go parading about town, but
I know.
you know,
I much more appreciate like Ian Banks's The Culture series, which is basically luxury space communism. So that's,
mm.
Excellent series, by the way. Maybe we
oh,
should do that
lovely.
one next.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right. I'll have to look into that. Well, so anyway, lol fuck you. Bleh, wow, lol fuck you plenty. Uh, After they have their little meeting, when Augustus confronts Darrow, and first, he asks Darrow, "Are you a Democrat?" Which Darrow denies, and then Augustus
You should have
shows
asked
him.
his daughter.
Yeah. And then Augustus shows him a series of video clips of the crew of the Vanguard, now the Pax, of course, listening to Darrow's speech about rising against their gold commanders. And Augustus chastises Darrow for it, because they'll be screwed if the other governors think they're, reformers or Democrats. And, Darrow's just, no, I mean, was what I did wrong? And Augustus is like, listen, I get you think that you did what you had to do, but you got to be real fucking careful here, dumbass. Uh, so, but in the end, Augustus is forced to ask Darrow if he can trust him. I love how Darrow's like, in what way? Because Augustus, he thinks most people are going to say yes without thinking, but Darrow he's like an onion. He's Shrek of the many layers. Okay? And so Darrow says, like, most men are liars. I'm telling you the truth. You're asking me if you can trust me. I'm asking you how. How are you asking? But they kind of talk about the Jackal, because the Jackal has his little businesses and stuff, and Augustus calls this slow power and says, slow power can grind away any stagnant enemy, but fast power, one that can travel where you go, do what you wish it to as effectively as a hammer hitting a nail, that is the power that lops off heads and steals crowns. Can I trust you with it? And Darrow's just like, I mean, you don't really have a choice because I'm the only one who can go to Lorne, and you need Lorne. So I thought that was just everything about that conversation was a really interesting back and forth. But the fact that Darrow already knew what Augustus was going to ask, and I mean, he played a good long game here. He really did.
For once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For once, he didn't reveal his whole hand.
Yeah. Well, and for once, and obviously there's reasons for this, of course, but at no point does he ever extend the Darrow benefit of the doubt to Augustus, which is like, but maybe if you just turned from your path, there's none of that.
Mm-mm.
There's none of that, and of course
he
we
did
know
kill
why.
his wife.
But yeah, exactly. So it's
I actually would posit that Augustus is the one person in this series that Darrow actually knows how to manipulate.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough.
Augustus has a bunch of very obvious levers.
And he's not a dumb person. And I don't think Darrow even before he went to the academy or anything, I don't think Darrow ever spent enough time with him to learn him inside and out. But I think it's just because Darrow is so focused on this is my main enemy for the longest time that he just.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also like, look, I think we talked about this before. Between the two of them, Mustang is the strategic thinker, Darrow's the tactical thinker. Augustus is neither, and that puts him on a really weak footing going into an actual shooting war. He has power, and he knows how to use it, and he knows how to plot an assassination. Okay. Which again we're going to learn about soon. But since that, he's been essentially playing defensively against the Sovereign. That's all he's been doing. He hasn't really made a move to counter her. He hasn't tried to attack her in any forum. He is just trying to shore up his own power as she tries to eat away at his base, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, he's sort of been forced into a position where he has fairly limited options. And one of Darrow's big successes is that he's made himself as important to Augustus as he has, because then Darrow is the most obvious and likely best, for a lot of reasons, one of those options.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I also think that Augustus actually knows in some ways his weaknesses, and I think he was using I think the tactician and or strategists that he had working for him, for better or for worse, were Pliny and now I'm blanking on the name of the guy who was his heir but not his heir. Leto, I think, were who he envisioned provided those that skill set to his house, basically.
I think that might be correct, but can you imagine yourself trusting Pliny or however we're pronouncing it if you didn't absolutely have to? Like you've maneuvered yourself to a point, or you've been maneuvered to a point where, yeah, you've got to rely on Pliny because there isn't anyone else.
Yeah, well, I viewed it a little differently. I viewed it as Augustus was so self-confident in his own power base that, of course, and that he brought Pliny to this point, that of course Pliny is loyal. That's how I interpreted it.
I think Pliny just yeah, sorry. I don't know. I'm just to me it's Pliny and I'm always going to pronounce it Pliny.
That's fine.
I think Pliny just knows Augustus like Darrow knows him, honestly. He knows how to play Augustus's strings.
I mean, yeah,
The problem is that Darrow and Pliny are at odds because Pliny has groomed Leto to be Augustus's, second in command / eventual heir, probably. But then comes Darrow, like coming like a wrecking ball.
yeah. Yeah, it's Augustus's self-confidence. I'd probably call it another thing. I'd probably call it hubris, overweening pride.
Yeah, hubris is. He has a lot of that.
Look, you cannot flip a page in this series without somebody or another having hubris.
I mean, Darrow
Well,
has too.
they all have. They're all full of themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, I think but I think that's part of what makes them golds, right? I mean, that's the whole point. They're better than everyone else, and
yeah,
they're brought from birth. They're trained to have hubris.
I mean, being better than everybody else because you've been genetically manipulated and given all of the education and everything to be better.
Okay, how is that different than Donald Trump's children? Okay, I don't want to get into politics here, but they're full of hubris and not necessarily smarts, but
I would not posit that their genetics are all that great either.
Sit here, it's unrealistic in a fantasy world, but you see perfect examples of it in our real world. I
think any monarchy is an example of that, honestly. You look at the British monarchy, shit, like they all get to go to Eton and either Oxford or Cambridge, and they might not really even be that intelligent, but they just get to go there, and so they get that A+++ education because of their breeding. Now, again, though, I'm going like in terms of genetics. Whoa. I mean, has anybody seen Prince William lately? That dude he aged bad. He did not get his mother's genes there.
Well, it could be worse. It could have been a Habsburg. Shots fired, Habsburgs. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just that, like, I mean, pretty much not in any, but in most sci-fi or especially fantasy stories, someone's going to have the hubris, right? And usually it's the bad guy, because they're usually the ones who start out on top and have been kind of on top for a while. So there's a reason for them to have the hubris, right? But in this series, everybody, right? And I think, like, honestly, like, to talk about this society being based on Greek or Roman or whatever, some weird mishmash of whatever. First of all, there's not a philosopher king among them. Secondly, the ancient Greeks would take one look at these people and piss themselves over the amount of hubris that they display, because the entire point of Greek mythology is that you can't have that. The entire point of Greek mythology is that A, you should have hubris, and B, Zeus likes to get down.
Well, okay, on that note,
we're
running long, so let's move on. Real quick, want to touch on Darrow trying to apologize to Roke for drugging him, claiming, I wanted to protect you because I knew I'd need you. And it's like, okay, so you didn't drug anybody but Roke. What does that say? And I really liked Roke's response, which was, what about what I need? You don't have the right to make choices for me because you're afraid it might interrupt your plans. Friends don't do that. And listen, the poet sometimes gets it right, honestly.
Sometimes.
Now, that said, we do finally get to meet in person, or on the page, as it were, bleh, as it were, the infamous Lorne. Do you guys say
Ow.
ow or o? Because like
I say ow.
I've
Ow.
said "oh" for the longest time, but then I've been listening to, Hail Reaper, which is a really
Mhm.
good, very extremely well produced, podcast about the series, and they say "ow," and so now it's like, because I've been listening to that, I'm like in this. Yeah, it's hard. So it's, whatever, Lorne O. Arcos. I'm gonna go Lorne O. Arcos and try to kick the "ow" sound out of my head, 'cause I personally would not pronounce it that way, but so we finally meet Lorne and we learn all this stuff about him, which, he wasn't raised in a palace because his father thought technology and culture were evil and denied pleasures like those and others for himself, but also for his sons. And now Lorne lives on Europa, which is this stormy ocean world with his entire family, save Lysander, who BT dubs as his grandson. And Darrow thinks of him as a man who is a meld of past and present, and he really, really respects him above all other golds of his generation, is the way Darrow thinks of it. But honestly, I feel like Darrow respects him above all other golds in general.
Yeah. With, I
Well,
think, maybe
what
one
what
exception.
what golds of another generation would he respect, right?
I mean, his own, I guess. He definitely has a huge amount of respect for Mustang.
As we all should.
And maybe
Yes.
Severo.
I would not call that respect.
I would call that respect on a sort of a friendship level.
Yeah,
in the sense that Severo's your crazy friend you kind of have to watch out for all the time, but
Yep.
not in the same
realm.
He's going to listen to Severo when it comes to planning an attack or how to get back at somebody. He is not going to listen to Severo in terms of maybe making policy.
Yeah.
And I think he might listen to Lorne.
Yeah.
Because Lorne has this great reputation that he's cultivated, that he's simply above all of this power politicking or politicking at all. He doesn't do it. He lives on Europa. He practices the blade. He has his family. That's what he does.
Well, and Darrow also says that if all golds were like Lorne, Reds would still toil beneath the earth, but he would have them know their purpose. And that doesn't make him good, but it makes him true.
Yeah.
Like, you'd still have to do your job that you were born and bred for or whatever, but you wouldn't be lied to
and
about why you're doing it.
I think a lot of the other indignities that go along with the class system would not exist if all golds were like Lorne, but they are not.
Right. Yeah. Now, real quick, Lorne's revelations about Nero, gosh darn it, I did again, Nero Augustus.
Well, if I can offer, because we all know, as we all know now, of course, the Reds are the Irish ones. So they would be the ones saying, oh, they'd be down there saying, whatever the fucking borough's name was.
I think for me, it depends on the way the name sounds. And honestly, that goes back to my roots, which is half my family is from upstate New York and half of them is from New England, mostly Massachusetts. So I have some aunts that I call aunt and I have some aunts that I call aunt.
I mean, that's fair. And I mean, honestly, it should be.
Do the ants live on a farm?
Yes, they do. It's a very nice farm. We should probably be saying, let's see, Arum, so or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's not o, but
yeah, but
but that story, man, like Darrow knew that Lorne hated Augustus, but until Lorne told him that story, I don't think he knew quite why. And I think this history, it first it like humanizes Augustus quite a bit, and then it takes some of that humanity away and makes you think, oh, so that's why the jackal is who and what he is,
Yeah.
because it's really sad that at, what was it, like 7 or 8 years old, his family was in this dispute with the Bolognas, of course, and they there's like they tried to poison someone tried to poison the other. I think it was Nero's father tried to poison. It must have been Nero's father tried to poison the Bolognas, and they failed. And the Bolognas put the entire house except for Nero to death. Like, and he only let Nero live because, oh, this is such an old family and we can't kill out their line entirely. So Nero, at 7 or 8 years old, is the only person left in his family and grows up, and he grows up and he's like this great, he's smart and he's a leader, and I'm guessing he goes to the institute and wins. And then he acts like he falls in love with the favored daughter. I think she was the youngest daughter of the Bologna family at that time, and they get married. And uh, he kills her and beheads her on their wedding night and stuffs grapes in her mouth, specifically because when I think at the time when his whole family had been killed by the Bolognas, the head of the Bologna house gave Nero grapes because he was like thirsty or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
And
kind of a combination red purple wedding, really.
yeah. I mean, grapes, yeah.
Yeah.
Grapes can be, I mean, they're called red grapes, but they're really purple, let's be
Purple.
real.
Yeah. It's also just like, I mean, I realize I said earlier that he's not a strategic or tactical thinker, and then he does this.
Mhm.
The problem is he's never done anything that sneakily underhanded or well plotted again ever. And it's also like
Well, that we know of.
that
I mean,
we know of, sure.
he must have done something reasonably well to rise to the power, to the level of power he had, even if it was nothing more than you know being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he side or he had an alliance with the sovereign that not only like he did the revenge murder of his brand new wife of his own accord, I'm guessing, but when the Bolognas tried to fight back, when they tried to get justice, they like marched into the citadel and found Nero on the throne because he had made a deal with the sovereign, and he was from then on in charge of Mars because I mean, the exact wording it isn't there, but the deal absolutely was Nero says, hey, I'm going to do this, help me do this, and I will help you do whatever you want, do what you want to do. That he must have known somehow that she wanted to overthrow her father because he is like a spearhead in her revolt against her father, just like less than like half a decade later or something like that.
Right,
So
which means that he had to have some tactical and strategic thinking at that point in time.
At that point, but he's lost it. I don't he certainly does not display it in any of the books that he's in the current
yeah.
setting of the
Nah, he's cushy in his cushy throne with his cushy power, man.
Yeah, I guess. I also just like, I mean, again, not that I can put this past humanity, but I'm also just like, great, you accomplish your goal of getting revenge on the Bolognas and also pissing all of the rest of them off to the point that the blood feud between your families is sparked up again. Well done.
It was never gonna go away, honestly.
Well, there was
Like
one way it could have gone away.
yeah. So before we move on into the action of this section, I just wanted to read this one quote by Lorne because I really, really love it. Darrow claims that he thinks Lorne left the society because it is sick and not worth sacrificing anymore. But Lorne tells him, I left the society not because it is sick, but because it is dead. There you go, Seth. The
Yeah.
society was created to instill order. Men were made to sacrifice so that humanity endured. They were given colors, lives limited and ordered so that we could destroy the timeless cycle of our race prosperity to greed to war. Gold was meant to shepherd the other colors, not devour them. Now we are trapped in that cycle, the very thing we endeavored to avoid. So, the society, the beautiful sum of all human enterprise, it's been dead and rotting for hundreds of years, and those who fight over it are but vultures and maggots.
Lauren's got a good 80%. He's almost there.
Yeah. I mean, you know, what can you expect?
Yeah.
So, turns out Aja and some Praetorians got to Europa before Darrow, though, and Lauren actually just wants to try to help Darrow escape. But again, plots within plans within plots. Of course, Darrow has something else in mind, and that's, you know, basically just forcing Lauren to join the war. When they were walking through the garden, he was scattering these little I can't remember how he just like spikes, I think is how little black
Yeah.
spikes. And somehow Lauren, who is apparently the best of everything, didn't notice. It's kind of okay, whatever. But
Well, I think once you take the sword out of his hands, he might be not as familiar with the more modern types of weaponry that are available, or the razor, I should say.
I don't know if it's that. I think it's more that he is only on guard right now because Aja and the Praetorians are there. I think he doesn't really believe that he has anything to worry about from Darrow. Because I mean, he straight up says like he kind of wishes Darrow was one of his sons, wishes he'd found him earlier and like been able to temper his rage. I
Yeah.
mean, he has a love for Darrow that honestly it's his undoing in this scene.
Yeah. I
He
mean, yeah, well, it's good. It's like the sovereign knew you'd be here. Well, I knew the sovereign knew I was going to be here. And well, now that we're fighting back, it looks like you said it was okay.
last but not least, Tactus.
Oh, buddy. Yeah, see, this is the one place where I kind of disagree with Lauren because and maybe we just didn't want to give Darrow the win here, but he keeps on employing this line of thinking no matter what. It's he does his I see the best in you, you can change, and somebody actually looks like they're gonna live up to it, and Lauren is like, nah, no, we're not letting this slide. You're dead.
Oh, this is kind of like a pivotal moment in my opinion of Lorne. I still like him because in as Darrow has said, in terms of like his generation, he is one of the better ones. But that's like saying my ultra conservative family member who is a Trump supporter and anti like all of these things and doesn't believe in systemic racism and stuff like that is still a good person because they give to charities and they don't they are great to their family members and so, you know what I mean,
Yeah,
like
it's
it's a catch 22. I don't even know if that's the right term in this situation with Lauren specifically. I mean, but yeah, Darrow Tactus. I don't think Tactus was going to kill those kids. Honestly,
no, I don't think or at least he was very willing to let himself be talked down by Darrow.
I don't think he would have killed them. I really don't. He had been standing there for a while. At least that's how I read it. He had been standing there for a while. And going back to part 2, when they're escaping from the Sovereign's party, he literally cuts down the people who were stomping on the children's heads and is like spitting at them, calling them baby killers, and Victra has to pull him away.
Yeah.
Whatever is in Tactus, and listen, I know Tactus isn't a good person. What I do think he is a great character, and I hate that he doesn't get more page time or get more of a chance to reveal what he could be,
Yeah.
because he I don't think he would have killed those children, but also poor Tactus. He has been an ass, but he is clearly a mess in this situation, both in the injured way and in the mindset way. And he sobs that all he wants to do is come home. Home being with Darrow, probably the Howlers, and in a way House Augustus, but it's really it's with Darrow and it's with their friends. And the first time I read this book, I didn't really perceive it this way. I still didn't like that Lorne killed Tactus, but on every subsequent reread, it has hit me a little harder, to the point where I finally was like crying when I read it this time, like actually tearing up. You know, Darrow wants to forgive him, wants to welcome him back into the fold because
Does he though?
yes. No, yes, he absolutely does. He is thinking, you know, if Tactus can change, Golds can change. They must be broken, which in this case he believes Tactus is broken. And I agree. I think he is. But they then must be given a chance. And I I'm sorry, but like Lorne is pissed and has other
Yeah.
ideas, and he kills Tactus, and Darrow has to hold on to him as he dies, and like, I'm not crying, you're crying. But P.S. While this is obviously meant to be consequences for Tactus, when Lorne says, now that the children are gone, consequences, the undertone here is that it's consequences for Darrow as well, for disturbing Lorne's peace and being the harbinger of danger to his family.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely buy that. You know, especially, and this is kind of a weird thing to draw because we know Lorne is above certain things, but maybe not above others. That he's just told this story about killing people to send a message to Darrow.
Mm-hmm. I don't think he necessarily doesn't believe that Tactus could change. I think he just is like, for sure, you threaten my family, consequences. But also, he is pissed at Darrow. He has been pissed at Darrow this entire chapter, even at the beginning when he assumed that all he was going to be able to do was help Darrow escape before Darrow exploded his garden and put his family even more at risk, honestly. Like this is he saw them having this bro moment, and I mean that in the best possible way, and he was like, nah, fuck you, Tactus, for being the person who was, you know, as far as he knows, going to kill not just his grandchildren, but like the children of the low colors in the house, because they were all hidden in the same
Yeah.
place. Which I will give I will give Lorne props for that, for making sure all of the children were safe somewhere, or trying to make sure all the children were safe somewhere, not just his own.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I and that's not something I noticed the first time I read, or maybe even the second time I read, but now that I'm like on my fifth read of this book, it's like I see it in the fact that he just says, now that the children are gone, consequences. He does the deed and then he just walks out without a word. Like, and I lost a lot of respect for Lorne there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because people need to be allowed to change. They do. That is a hardcore opinion that I have. If they are willing to do the work, they need to be allowed to change.
You at least, I think, need to give people a second chance. Beyond
Okay.
that, I'm not sure.
But in the vacuum of what yes, second chances are fine depending on what it is you've done,
Yeah.
right? I mean, yes, Tactus didn't kill the kids, but he probably killed others of Lauren's friends, family, employees as he came in. I Do you forgive him for that?
I'm
I
not
don't know.
I forgiveness is not, I think that's not ours to give. It was Darrow's, right? And Darrow so
Well,
strongly believes that gold has to change that I can't, I don't know, man.
but Lauren doesn't believe that. Lauren's already given up on gold.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in a way that means he's given up on Darrow too in this, not even in this moment, what he says to Darrow before this, when he says like, I wish I had been able to raise you, and uh like I would not have raised you to be great. I would have raised you to be good or to be decent. Um you could have grown old with the woman you love. And I respect Lorne. I don't like him. Not after this, honestly. And listen, Tactus is an ass. I get that. He has done some shit. But I also think that he is, and we said this, I believe, in the last episode, we were talking about part 2, that he is a product of his own abuse and manipulation, not just the current situation, the sovereign, or his family. His family is fucking horrible.
Yeah.
They say
And
that over and over again.
they're continuing to work on him.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
that's yeah. So
with the end of Tactus's life, we move on to chapters 30 through 35.
After his foray to Europa, Darrow rejoined some of the fleet with Lorne and company in tow. With the help of Ragnar, the Telemanuses claimed all 10 of the Bologna ships that had been sent to deal with the Europa situation. And while Darrow does well in his offer to compensate them for their losses, he oversteps when he dares ask if Ragnar could lead absent a gold. He dials it back immediately, but as soon as the Telemanuses have left the room, Orion, the blue he straight up put in charge of the packs, chides him for his error. Darrow notes that she is observant, and she says she had to be, because it's the only way to beat the monsters. It's not the only way, he tells her. You can always become a monster, too. But Orion insists there are a billion paths to choose, and then Darrow is saved from having to respond that because Mustang is arriving on the shuttle, why not? Why on a shuttle? Well, it turns out Augustus' foray to Ganymede did not go as well as Darrow's to Europa. He is captured, and Mustang only escaped with the help of her brother because good old Pliny started a whole ass coup, and they've now lost control of the better part of their fleet. Not only that, but Pliny approached Mustang immediately after her father's raid failed, saying her house had fallen to ruin, but he would divorce his wife and marry her because he had always had his eye on her. So laugh out loud, out loud, out loud. Mustang took one of his eyes, which he unceremoniously plops onto the ground. Discussion and plans follow, but before they all disperse, Darrow sees several loitering around the discarded eyeball because he wants it. Mustang squints at him, but allows that it's all his, and several grins, saying he hopes to collect the set. Seriously, nothing like some good goblin several humor to break up what is clearly a rough situation.
After a brief funeral for Tactus, during which Darrow learns that Tactus took back his sale of the Stradivarian violin Darrow had gifted him and was practicing in secret, hoping to surprise Darrow with a sonata. Mustang reminds Darrow that he needs to fix things with Roke, who is more upset than ever, both about losing Tactus and about Darrow letting Aja escape. Darrow knows he has to fix things, but he has 100 other things to fix as well. And it doesn't help that his friends and counselors can't help but argue amongst themselves. And Victra is the biggest victim of their ire. No one trusts her because her mother was one of the first to betray Augustus and ally with the sovereign. No one except Darrow and Roke, that is, and they fight for her inclusion in their plans, which include taking back their fleet and then taking back Mars. But the real question is, How will they do these things? That's another answer we don't get right away because next thing we know, Darrow is trying to sleep, but someone is ringing his doorbell. And that someone is, not surprisingly, Mustang. Ragnar tried to trace her away. Ragnar tried to chase her away, but Darrow lets her in, to his room anyway. They converse, but it's in circles, and in the end, when Mustang tells him that he should ask her to stay, he can only think that if she gives him her heart, he will break it. But really, it's more about his fear of her rejecting him when she discovers what he really is. And so he doesn't respond fast enough, and then she is gone. As it turns out, their plan is to sneak into Pliny's ship via a supply vessel called a camel ship. And during this trip, Darrow has a VIC, very important chat with Ragnar. He tells he tries to tell Ragnar that they are brothers, but Ragnar is confused because he thinks of Darrow as his master. So Darrow cuts his finger and smears the blood on Ragnar's sigils and then his own, trying to prove that yes, they are the same. But Ragnar still bucks this idea because he doesn't understand how they could be the same when Darrow is a gold and comes from the sun. And this is when Darrow bears all. And this is when Darrow bears it all, admitting that he was born 6 inches from the earth. Wow, 6 inches from the earth, that he was deceived as Ragnar has been deceived, and that the sons came for him, gave him a second chance. He wants Ragnar to choose to be Darrow's friend, to rise with him. Darrow leaves Ragnar without waiting for him to answer, but when their camel ship arrives in the bay of Pliny's flagship, Ragnar is behind him, along with Lorne, Mustang, Kavix, Roke, Severo, Daxo, and Victra. The low colors don't stand in their way, and they immediately release the prisoners Pliny has taken. Well, not before Severo makes each of them thank the Reaper for saving them, including the Jackal, who also apparently has to play along with Severo's "what's in my pocket" riddle. Though Darrow helps the Jackal along by pointing to his eye, because of course Severo still has Pliny's eyeball in his pocket. Lols.
The crew eventually positions themselves just above Pliny's conference room. They've taken over the ship's speakers, and Severo sings, "If your heart beats like a drum and your leg's a little wet, it's 'cause the Reapers come to collect a little debt." Darrow mounts the Leechcraft drill that they brought along and burns through the floor, slamming into the middle of the conference table with Lorne, Mustang, and Severo following close behind. Obviously, the Golds, who, let's be real, kind of stupidly align themselves with Pliny, freak the fuck out. And it doesn't help that when Pliny screams for them to seize the traitors, Lorne simply says, "If anyone comes within 2 meters of Darrow, I kill everyone in this room." Honestly, fuck you, Pliny. No one is ready to call Lorne out Arcos's bluff. Seriously, one dude almost tries it. His neighbor stabs him in the back. Unfortunately for Pliny, he assumed Aja would kill Darrow on Europa and, never fucking followed through to make sure that happened. As Darrow says, the Jackal failed to kill him, Antonia failed to kill him, Proctor's Apollo and Jupiter failed to kill him, Cassius failed, Carnus failed, Cagni failed, Aja and her Praetorians failed. Darrow doesn't kill Pliny then, though. He merely gives him a good slap across the face and leaves him to his quote-unquote friends, who, of course, immediately murder him. The peerless Gold go with the wind, chasing power, and Darrow knows he cannot trust them, but he also knows he is once again their leader, so he announces that he is bound for Mars and calls for an iron rain.
Ugh, Darrow, maybe don't immediately start spouting to everyone that Ragnar can be a leader of his own accord. I just,
Yeah.
like a little too much too quick,
At least
Orion
for
is
right
great
now,
there, though.
you know.
Orion is great there, though. I loved it. Like, I love her. I love her so
Yes. Yes.
much.
Yes.
Yes. Don't say too much.
Oh, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to say that there will be things to discuss in later books.
But yeah, ugh, Darrow. Like the fact that the Telemanuses of all people who have not really questioned anything he's done at this point are both like, huh? When he asks them if Ragnar could lead Absent Gold, is like, okay, dude, if these people are raising their eyebrows at you, dial it back. Now, also, I gotta.
But correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm getting the timing of this right. The timing of this wrong. The question is sort of stupid for Darrow to ask for a number of reasons. One, I suspect he already knows the answer because didn't he already have this discussion with Augustus regarding Orion, and that of course people can do things that are outside their color.
I think he was expecting the Telemonases to be a little more open-minded about it. I think that's why I think he was kind of high on the winds, and also knows that the Telemonases are really the people who raised Mustang to be the way she is, way more so than her father did. And I think he expects them to maybe not expects, but hopes too much that they are more open, especially after they are telling him like, "Oh, look at Ragnar did a great job." All the accolades to Ragnar.
I mean, they were a bit more open to it than the council was open to Sam's suggestion of democracy, but
Hmm. Why would we ever let the commons pick for themselves?
Yeah.
I mean, they can't do any worse a job than you're doing. Yeah.
So again, or otherwise, I did have to lull a little bit at Lorne after Darrow and Mustang immediately figure out that the shuttle she escaped on is definitely being tracked. And he's like, "When did you discuss this?" Mustang, confused. "Just now." Severo, "Don't worry, you're not senile. They're just odd." It's just another one of those Darrow and Mustang moments that but P.S. though, the orange Scyther, who I'm pretty sure at this point well, just say at this point for sure is the only orange we have ever met, is great. He steps forward and he offers a better solution than just ditching the shuttle. Like, this is not something he would have felt comfortable doing with any gold other than Darrow, probably. And his idea to use it to send Pliny's hounds barking in the wrong direction is obviously great. Just period. Like, and then just forever LOL about Severo and Pliny's eye. Severo's such a weirdo and I love him.
Yeah, I mean, Severo, we, in addition to all of the obvious trauma he's had to deal with, there's some other stuff that's in there that's just, it is just something. Like his whole obsession with eyes, which will
come back again later.
We'll come back. Not all that long from now, as I recall, but yeah. Well,
and I mean, I don't know. He's just a weird little dude. Funny aside, I'm a member of a couple Red Rising fan groups on Facebook, like have been for several years now. And at some point, Pierce Brown named the person who was his inspiration for Severo.
Uh-huh.
An actual real life person. And this person joined one of the Facebook groups that I'm a member of. And people were like, "So are you like really like Severo? Like, how are you the inspiration?" This poor dude was like, I don't know what I got myself into. I believe it was the Hickson Leones group on Facebook. But I can't remember the guy's name. To be honest, I wouldn't call it out. I don't even know if he's still a member. I'm not active really in any Facebook groups anymore, but really random aside. So we go on to Roke, who is big mad that Darrow, wow, I can talk, that Darrow let Aja go, and probably also mad that, Darrow kept the plan from him and all. And they're discussing Tactus's death, and Roke says he went as he lived, only wish he could have lived a little longer. And Mustang asks Roke if he thinks Tactus would have changed, to which he replies, "He was always our friend. It was our responsibility to help him, even if it was like hugging a flame." And of course, he eyes Darrow, and Darrow insists, that he didn't want Tactus to die. He wanted him to come back with them. But Roke like so clearly doesn't believe him. Very, very obviously because he let Aja go. So he's lumping all of these Darrow's sins, one on top of the other, even though Darrow already explained why he let Aja go. And Roke scoffs naturally. Aja, kills our friend. She kills Quinn, but we let her walk away for the grander scheme. Everything costs something, Darrow. Perhaps you'll soon tire of making your friends pay. And Mustang tells him that isn't fair, but Roke isn't cowed, reminding them they're running out of friends, which isn't entirely wrong. And that not all of them are as tough as the Reaper. Not all of them want to be warriors. Le sigh. It's just he's him and Roke haven't had all that much one-on-one time.
Yeah.
And this is the first point where it's like, oh, he big bad, dude. You need to fix this.
Yeah, that's also something that really annoyed me throughout this book, is that it's very obvious from like chapter 2 that, well, not chapter 2, whenever Quinn gets killed, that Darrow needs to go talk to Roke. Like they need to have a sit down, they need to have something, they need to have a chat, they need to do whatever, and he continues not to do it, and he does other things, and I'm like, dude, you had an hour in there that you could have gone and talked to the guy, and yet he does not. But also, Roke, Tactus was your friend who betrayed you and was working for the other side and had maybe gone to kill a bunch of kids. Probably not, but maybe.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that Darrow did not kill him out of hand immediately when he got into that room means your argument is null and void, sir. Sit down, please.
Roke sees things in a very black and white manner.
Well, everybody in this book,
Obsidian
everybody
and
in
white
books
manner.
has, except for Mustang. Like, it's like you can make generalizations about everybody in this book except for Mustang because she's awesome.
Now, to be fair, when they go into the War Council and everybody's all about being anti-Victra and she insists that she's loyal, Roke also, he like really stands up for her. He really does. Okay. Yeah. Like the Telemonases, Lorne, even Severo and Mustang are for setting her aside someplace safe, aka like putting her in a cell somewhere, so that she can't turn on them. And yes, her mother apparently has sided with the Sovereign, but Roke really does stand up for her. Now, granted, it is Darrow, like it's all eyes on Darrow, and he tells them, chance made us golds. We could have been born any other color. Chance put us in our families, but we choose our friends. Victra chose me. I chose her, like I chose all of you. And if we cannot trust our friends, then what's the point in breathing? Side note, he also like sees how Victra is looking at him and thinks about how the jackal told him that Victra loves him. Yeah. And wonders like, could I ever love her? But no. In another world, Mustang would never be a warrior, would never be cruel. In any world, Victra would always be like this, always a warrior, like Io really, always too wild and full of fire to find peace in anything else. It's so dramatic, Darrow. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
She is a warrior, but she also like stood in a corner with you and told you that she loves the smell of stone before it rains and hates the color gold. Like, to say that she is only a warrior is it's shoehorning her into that one thing. And also to say Mustang would never be a warrior is shoehorning her as well, because Mustang is a warrior, just not in the physical sense.
At this current time, she was. In book 1, like everybody, she was a physical warrior. It's also like,
well, I mean, she was to the extent that she needed to be, but
it's not her first option,
right? And that was never the game she played, and that's why she chose Darrow as her ally, because she knew he could be what she could not in that sense, but she could also be what he couldn't be in the political sense, and like,
Yeah.
but to I mean, he's shoehorning Mustang into Mustang would never be a warrior. She is, just maybe not in the way you see warriors. And also, to shoehorn Victra into just being a warrior is wrong as well.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like I think I talked a little bit about how I'm a little ambivalent about Victra, and that is largely because of some stuff she's going to say later down the line. Some stuff we would disagree violently on politics
You're probably not wrong there.
and capitalism, but
well,
I don't know. But
Yeah, don't get into
you and
future
I
stuff.
will probably disagree violently about capitalism, but that's neither here nor there. Well, that's no reason not to like someone.
Stuff, things.
I think it depends.
family
I think it
business.
depends on the level of capitalism we're talking about. And I agree, Victor has some odd
tendencies.
Yeah.
She's got some tendencies. Now,
I mean, her family are a bunch of slavers. It is what it is.
Yeah. Right there.
So,
but I gotta get back to. So now we shouldn't talk about it yet. So
No,
I'm not.
no,
I'm going to
no.
leave it for later. I will
so
leave
much-
my
there's-
thoughts for later. I hope.
Folks, this is
I
book
hope I
two.
remember what my thoughts are when the later happens.
Write
but we
them
will leave
down.
Yeah.
Take notes.
That's too difficult.
Of an extant 5-book series, and we've all read all 5 books.
Listen,
No,
do
I
you
know
know
we
how many?
have-
Do you know how many notes I have? Like, it's absolutely insane how many notes I have on these books. So you can take some notes, Jonathan.
Yeah. And when is 6 coming out? Like March or May or something like that?
Sorry, guys.
Soon. Anyway. Yes.
I think
Sorry,
it
guys.
was
I'm fighting. I'm fighting whatever my kids have
The
had.
answer
for like a
is
week
sooner
now.
than the winds of winter.
It's no, book 6 is coming out in July.
Right.
There
Sooner than the winds of winter.
There are a lot of things
Everything
that are
is sooner
happening
than the
sooner than
winds.
winds of winter. That's we all saw that thing where he said he was 75% done.
No,
Right?
I
75% done?
refuse. I refuse to look at anything because I don't believe it's ever happening. Anyway,
It just
But
happened.
he's been 75% done for 75 years. I mean,
yeah. So, gosh, sorry.
What about all of the stuff the show didn't
So they
cover,
all
Chris?
accept Victra, and begrudgingly, obviously,
Yeah,
on
yeah.
some of their parts. But next up, I
Mhm.
just gotta talk on this because the hot goss is that Augustus is afraid of robots.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean, I have to believe this is an Asimov reference, right? Like,
I think it's a Herbert reference.
okay, all right.
I think it's
mean,
a Butlerian
not a
jihad.
Battlestar Galactica. I thought it was a Battlestar Galactica.
It could
that
be, all right,
too.
yeah, I'd go with that.
There's a lot of robots taking over. I mean, shit, it's a Terminator reference for all we know.
I mean, yeah, but it's I do like the old robots would have taken over the. I mean, I don't see how they would have done a worse job than what.
Yeah, I find it really
Well,
funny,
they
like,
might have eliminated humanity entirely. That would be his job.
It's objectionable. Yeah, I'm sure.
I just find it really hilarious that Mustang tells Darrow that Augustus, her father, was convinced that robots would have overthrown man and now ruled the solar system if Earth's empires had never been destroyed. And Darrow thinks this is hilarious. Like, he's like cackling about it, rightfully so.
Yeah.
And Darrow, this is another interesting part though, and this doesn't really have much bearing on the story at this point, but I still just love it because Darrow then asks if Augustus is also afraid of aliens, and while Mustang is like, I don't know, she does say they're out there, and he's like, wait, what? And she's like, no, we've never found any, but the Drake-Roddenberry equation suggests a mathematical probability that they exist, and that's a Star Trek reference, right?
It was a Star Trek reference, but I don't think. But that the mathematical probability that exists is actually called something else, which I'm blanking on what it is now.
Oh no, for sure.
I think it's the fact we haven't found life is the Fermi paradox, but
right. No, I think it is actually the Drake equation. Just
it might be the Drake. So
I think
yeah,
it's just the
Roddenberry
Drake
had nothing
equation.
to do with
Yeah.
it. Right.
But I mean,
No,
yeah, but
she had, Pierce added Roddenberry on there, and
Well-
he does a very good job of inserting these like references in a way that like I mean the first time I read this I didn't really think about it, and then again on subsequent rereads I was like, oh ha, Roddenberry.
yeah.
Like I just skim you're reading so fast, right? The first time because you love it so much, at least for me, that you don't think about these tiny little things, but then you read like Drake Roddenberry and you're like, oh, Star Trek.
Well, I think in one of the first of dozens, if not hundreds, of messages I sent you while I was reading this series, like I want to say it's something like on page 10 of book 1, there's reference to a place called Osgiliath on Mars, and I was like,
it's farther in than that, but yes, yeah, it's they're
that from John Carter.
No, Osgiliath.
No, Osgiliath. It's Tolkien.
Tolkien.
Oh,
It's it's the city between Minas Tirith and Minas Morgul, or
I cannot
what used
tell
to
a
be
lie.
Minas Anor and Minas Ithil.
I cannot tell a lie. I have not read Tolkien since I was 12.
Gasp! I just reread it. Not this past summer, but the summer before.
And that was a while ago.
Well, I say all of it. I mean, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, because the Silmarillion is a never. I barely finished the Silmarillion. It's a never reread for me.
Hard disagree. Every time it's the Silmarillion, The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and then Unfinished Tales.
In order,
because I'm that guy.
But yes, no, yeah, the Osgiliath thing was like there. It's when Darrow is traveling through the city, I think, to go see Mickey for the first time.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
And they're trying to sell like we're gonna like VR trips to places, and they're like, oh, we'll send you to Osgiliath, and it's like, that's cute. But he did. That's the thing. Like Pierce does a really good job of throwing in these like little references to sci-fi and fantasy that you might pass over on a first read, maybe, but it's hard to ignore them on the side. And the Drake Roddenberry equation was just like, oh, okay. But it's still fucking hilarious that Augustus was so afraid of robots. Like, oh, dude. Well, maybe you weren't wrong, though.
I mean, maybe, but my question, I think at this point, I don't think he could have found enough unbiased sources to not be afraid of robots. Right? Because I'm sure the people who built the culture that they did had to justify not using robots for more stuff than they are using robots for currently. And I imagine that would have to be something like, and yes, they would have taken over. Sure would have taken over everything.
So I think next the most important thing to talk about really is Darrow tells Ragnar all the things. And not only does he tell him, but he doesn't swear Ragnar to silence or demand an immediate answer because, as Darrow says, Dancer demanded none from me. I had to make the choice. If I'd been forced into service, then I would have given up 1,000 times. Slaves do not have the bravery of free men. That is why golds lie to low reds and make them think they are brave. That is why they lie to obsidians and make them think it is an honor to serve gods. Easier than the truth. Yet it takes only one truth to bring a kingdom of lies crashing down. And Darrow knows that in the end, he needs Ragnar to join him because red alone will not be enough. And like, man, thank the gods that Ragnar does join him, because otherwise that would have been bad. I don't really see that I don't really see a world in which Ragnar made a different choice, because there's other hints from the moment he meets Ragnar. There are other hints that Ragnar is angry about the life that he has been forced to live and stuff like that. So it's not necessarily a like a twist or a surprising thing that Ragnar joins him. But man, Darrow, like, this is a weird time to just be like, hey, here's my life laid bare. We're going to get plenty. Yeah, I'm a side or not, even if I'm a red.
I think Darrow does that more for himself than out of any necessity to get Ragnar to come along. I think Darrow is very uncomfortable with the way Ragnar treats him, and is like, I can't, I gotta stop this somehow. This is not working for me.
Well, and I think he's also kind of taken that like first sniff of cocaine, that first shot of heroin with Severo knowing who he is and what he is and being accepted, and now he is jonesing for everybody he cares about to know. And he thankfully isn't entirely stupid about it quite yet, but like, at this point it's like, I need it's kind of like you have a secret, right? Your personal secret, not somebody else's secret. You have a secret and you tell one person, and then you're like, fuck me, man. Like, that one person, you get that feeling of like, God, that relief. And then you need to tell somebody else. And I do think that's what it was. I don't think it was the most intelligent decision to tell anybody else, but I mean, if he was going to tell anybody else, Ragnar was a good choice, I guess. Because here's the other thing, like, even if Ragnar hadn't gone along with what he said, I guess the other thing is like, maybe that was a weak choice for Darrow, because he also knows that Ragnar sees him as his master, and would he actually do anything against him based on this knowledge?
I mean, I think it'd be easy enough for that coin to flip the other way, and for Ragnar or an Obsidian, let's say, to go, wait a minute, I've been calling a red master this whole time. That will not stand. I am better than reds. And then, but I mean, I agree. It's got to feel good for somebody he's actually working with on a day-to-day basis to know. And I mean, maybe he's even using Ragnar as a little trial for Mustang.
I mean, it's still what is technically considered a slave talking to another slave, so I don't know if I would call it that.
Yeah, it's not quite that, but I mean.
But no, I agree. Like, he's uncomfortable with the way Ragnar treats him, and I think that's definitely a part of it. But I do think another part of it is that he needs somebody else to know, and this is the person he can tell with very possibly the least amount of blowback. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I do think he absolutely wanted to tell Ragnar for other reasons. Like, he trusts and respects Ragnar. He has seen how he has fought for their side and everything. But yeah, at this point, who else was he going to tell?
Yeah.
But good for him that Ragnar believed in it or whatever and is following him, because if Ragnar could have like stood up and just cut him down right then, but I think Ragnar still, I have to imagine there was like an expectation that Ragnar would still have that sort of connection as master to slave, that he wouldn't immediately try to ruin him, I don't know.
Yeah.
But, then they, Darrow and friends take down Pliny, which is chef's kiss.
Yeah. I mean, we all, like, look, the minute Pliny appeared on stage, he was written to make us want him to die. Much in the same way that, I mean, although I think these people have done enough of it themselves, and this is a weird example, sorry, I've been watching a lot of the show. If you watch the first several seasons of Top Chef, certain people are definitely set up as to be the person you want to see leave. Like, there's got to be, there's even among this story of one man surrounded by mostly villains with a few friends, there's got to be somebody that we just need a good cathartic, exit from. And Pliny is that person.
Yeah. And we get it because Darrow just slept. Lauren is like, anybody moves, I'll kill everybody in this room. Which I feel is also like a reference that it's like on the tip of my tongue, but I'm not thinking about where it might be from or remembering
Pulp
where it might
Fiction?
be from. Maybe, yeah. Actually, yeah, maybe. It's been a while since I've seen Pulp Fiction. Well, anyway. But I love that he slaps Pliny across the face and therefore out of his chair. Lols. But doesn't hurt him beyond that because Darrow thinks, I will not demean the moment with cruelty like Carnus or Titus would. My condescension is my weapon. And, oh God, like, I don't know, like, that hits me like personally real hard, like in the best way. Like, I don't need to physically harm you. I can just be super condescending to you, an asshole. Like, I feel you, Darrow. I feel you. And again, this is why I love it. This is why this is why I have such torn feelings about Darrow. I mostly don't like him because he is the worst parts of me. But then he leaves the room, leaves Pliny with his friends who immediately kill him because here is Darrow's big lesson about trust. As we said in the summary, they go with the wind, chasing power, the golds, but they don't realize power doesn't shift. Power is resolute. It is the mountain, not the wind. To shift so easily is to lose trust, and trust is what has kept me alive. Trust in my friends and their trust in me. And the sovereign also understands this, right? Because that's why she has her Furies and keeps them close. Because after all, what does all the power in the world matter if your closest friends can betray you? And this is also why he started fresh with Victra, why he told Ragnar the truth, why he knows he needs to make amends with Lorne and Roke, even though these people are allies only because they must be. Like he knows they are so stern and rigid that they will break and shatter against one another, not because of me, he thinks, but because of what they are, which is again like big oof.
Yeah.
Oh, Darrow. He listen, he has it so right here. And regardless of what you think about him telling Ragnar what he did when he did, he has it right. I mean, all these people were sided with Augustus, and then Pliny betrayed him, and they just immediately sided with Pliny. Like, they're all a bunch of assholes. That's all most of these golds are. Not all of them, but most of them.
Yeah.
But that's people in general.
I mean,
it is. I mean, it's
yes
overwhelming.
And no. I think yes and no. I think there's a difference between people right now and friendships in real life right now and the way very specifically the way they are in this situation or in this society, because again we go back to the whole like there's only iron golds because there's other iron golds. Like, yes, there are always those aspects of people's personalities, alliances, whatever, but I mean, this is an extreme of that, right? So, go ahead.
Most people are followers. It's not just and they follow what the side they think will win, basically, or that will benefit them the most. So, The fact you jump ship as soon as the tide turns is not surprising.
I
You're
mean,
not entirely wrong, but
it's
I
just
think there's a lot more.
Just mostly wrong.
the
No.
willingness and the ease with which these people,
Yeah.
for whom being a warrior is a defining characteristic of their life, honor is the defining characteristic of their life, supposedly. It's not. That's what Darrow's pointing out, is that the defining characteristic of their life is hunger for power.
I think that there's a lack of nuances in this society versus what there are in today's society. But mostly, I think a big part of that is because we're looking at, like, yes, there's like the 1% and everything here today now, but most people are below the 1%, but still feel like
By
they
definition.
Yeah.
but still feel like they have a voice, whereas in this society they don't, right? So, like, you don't have a voice really unless you are a peerless guard or a gold, like a politico, whatever. Even Pliny, he's not a peerless guard, but he's a politico. He's high up there,
And he's a gold.
so right, exactly. So I think that's the nuance between our current society and this society, is that yes, you're right, most people are our followers and will go where the wind blows, but a lot of people still feel like they have a voice now, because they do when they absolutely don't in this society, unless they're
so let's just take the US out of the equation, make it the world society. So yes, we, in the, what I would argue probably is, people still feel they have a voice in our democracy currently in the United States. I don't think anyone in China feels they have any power whatsoever. I don't think anyone in Iran thinks they have any power whatsoever.
The people in Iran, though, some of them are starting to try to take the power back.
I understand that, but I'm just,
and actually
and same in China right now too. But
Yeah.
I don't think any of them, feel like they have.
But those folks are not going to then go, well, you know what? The government looks like it's winning. I better switch to their side.
No, they don't know. They don't go, the government looks like they're winning. It's which members of the government look like they're winning, and I'll switch to that side.
I have very little experience with current Chinese politics other than my younger cousin, who, long story short, had a not great family life and was growing up in a town that had a very large Chinese population, and started taking Chinese language lessons when he was very young, because most of his friends were Chinese. And he currently lives in China and is a full-on communist. And he's not any sort of, upper crust communist. I don't even know what the I don't
But
know,
China's
honestly.
not even communist anymore.
Not really, no.
Yeah, but I mean, he is so into the Communist Party that it's like, it's not about who's the leader, it's about being communist, it's about being part of that group, right? It's not even necessarily about, like, he doesn't care about having his voice heard in the Communist Party or in communism. He cares about spreading the word of communism outside of China. I don't know, man. It's a lot. But to each their own, I guess.
Bit of a zealot, your cousin, is what you're saying.
Yeah. White kid from Massachusetts.
Well,
But again, like, I think that in this society, you don't, again, the case system that they have, it doesn't allow you to have a voice unless you're a gold. And even as a gold, it doesn't necessarily allow you to have a voice unless you are educated and or connected, in which case Pliny was. So
it's very important that you be connected as a
yeah.
gold.
Now that said, So Darrow might not trust these people, but he kind of has to rely on them as we dive into chapters 36 through 39.
And next we know the Iron Rain that Darrow called for is happening, which means it's a big Darrow speech moment. He insists that while the city should be taken and the golds who will not bend should be killed, the low colors should be protected. They will not collapse the mines, rape the cities of Mars, or despoil her verdant grounds. They do not want to take a corpse, they want to take her back. Whites come around to basically bless the Gold Warriors prior to battle, after which said warriors recite the names of their chief enemies, and then Darrow takes his leave of Roke, Lorne, Mustang, and Theodora. The latter two kind of sweet, even if the former two were more on the bittersweet side of things. That said, Darrow does get a little morale boost on his way to the hangars with Severo and Ragnar when Severo points out that a bunch of people have painted sling blades on their armor. And it doesn't stop there. Even as Darrow is wondering aloud to Severo whether this might be a gold trick, whether Ares even exists at all, Severo lets loose a howl and the entire bay howls back in kind, and then the standards of the separate legions fall, even those of the Augustus Lion, and are replaced with wolves and sling blades. Act like a god, get followed like a god, Severo insists.
That's you, Jonathan.
That's you.
I'm behind. I'm sorry. I lost the page. Oh, and there's a couple of quick blasts in the past as well, because it turns out that Proctor Jupiter has been spying for Augustus and comes round to inform Darrow that last he knew all of the Bologna were in Aegea, and a peculiar series of heavy shuttles landed just last night. This is followed. Crap. I jump. Where am I? I've lost
No,
it
this
again.
is followed was right.
No, I know. I just lost the whole page when I tried to page down.
Oh,
and
my.
went way past where I was supposed to go. Sorry.
Folks, we're having some
page
technical
19.
difficulties.
Page 19, thank you. This is followed by a quick chat with Milla, one of Darrow's first recruits at the Institute, and then they're all in spit tubes waiting to be launched into space, through Mars' atmosphere to land on her ground and win her back. The playful banter between Darrow and some of his friends is cut short when Roke announces, "Let fall the rain." And they're off. Silence reigns as Darrow and his legions rip through the space battle, seeing the Telemanus' war party launch from Victor's ship, which then plunged into the Bologna formation, something that would be a very bad idea, except surprise, Victor's mother switches sides, and soon Darrow loses sight of that engagement and has to focus on what comes next, making landfall and slipping under the gap between the city's shields and the ground. However, Darrow's landing party ends up much further from their goal than they had anticipated, and now they have to travel 300 kilometers, something that is at least a bit easier than it could be considering they all have grav boots. While their trip isn't without its troubles, they eventually meet up with Mustang's group, which of course landed much closer to their goal. And let's be real, that's probably because it's Mustang. Ha! At which point they are hailed by Roke, and boy, does he have news for them.
Or does he? Because Darrow finally flies up into the clouds to get beyond the jammers and the storm that is raging around them. And because when Darrow finally flies up into the clouds to get beyond the jammers and the storm that is raging around them, Roke ends up revealing something Darrow apparently already knew. The Sovereign is on Mars and trapped behind the shields in Aegea. Roke is clearly angry with Darrow for not letting him in on this little secret. But while Darrow does look forward to revealing that this is why they let Aja escape from Europa, because they could use his bomb's radiation signature to track her and therefore the Sovereign as well, he kind of has bigger fish to fry right now. They arrived on Olympus, that's wrong. They arrive on Olympus, yes, the Institute's Olympus, which their foes had been using as a base, and face basically zero resistance. Also discovering that the students have, guys, I wrote this very quickly this afternoon. Oh gosh. And face basically zero resistance, also discovering that the students have already been evacuated. So, insert "it's a trap" realization here. But what kind of trap? They don't really have time to figure this out as they need to get a hold of the sovereign, literal physical hold, capture her, you know. This involves ignoring the battle raging around Aegea's defensive wall, and instead swimming under that wall through the opening that was cut by the sons of Ares at Darrow's behest. Once on the inside, Mustang departs to finish her task of taking down the shield. But then Darrow is distracted. A little brown girl is there, just standing in the mud, and she has something in her hand. Severo moves to shoot her, and Darrow knocks his hand aside. Darrow looks up and sees Bologna Knights and Obsidians floating above them, beyond the range of the EMP globe in the little girl's hand. She presses the globe's button, and Darrow and his people begin to die. Oh God. Ugh, this is a terrible place to this is a terrible section to end an episode on, but we got what we got. So as we go back to preparing for the Iron Rain, Lorne reminds them they aren't fighting for a planet, but for men and women to cut off their heads and see their armies crumble. And then they list their enemies, as we mentioned, knowing that in the halls of those enemies, their own names are being recited. And Darrow tells Lorne that he's most interested in meeting Cassius, but as we all know, that's not true. And a deep shame burns in Darrow for how he yelled at Cassius's family. And he's thinking, I beat him badly, but I didn't have to like it as much as I did. Sometimes I wonder if he were raised a red and I a gold, if he wouldn't have ended up a better man than I am now, and I a worse man than he could ever be. For some reason, I think I could have been capable of great evil. Maybe that's the guilt. Maybe that's the fear of a life where I never knew EO. I don't know. Or maybe it's the fear of knowing how easily I fall to pride. Honestly, listen, stop it with the 2 real takes, Darrow.
Yeah, I don't know. Look. He stabbed you in the stomach and left you to die in the winter in a wilderness.
But it was all for his brother, his sweet, sweet brother.
Oh, we've had that discussion. And now he's stooping your ex.
No.
A little satisfaction, maybe.
No, not now. He was stooping the ex.
He was stooping the ex, but not right now. But when they had the duel, he was stooping.
Yeah,
well,
but
not,
that was straight up because Cassius really does care about Mustang.
Yeah,
this isn't. I don't think. Yes, I think there was some satisfaction on Cassius's part that he was screwing Darrow's ex. To be completely honest, my high school love was, I'm not going to give his name. I had a high school love, and when we were all in high school, his best friend did not like me because the guy I was with kind of, I don't know, I guess he blamed, I heard after the fact, not just from this person I'm talking about, but from other people, that he blamed his lack of availability and stuff on me. Oh, it's Tara's fault. I have to be with her all the time. That's not the case. That was never the case, by the way. But that said, later on, I ended up dating my high school love's best friend and marrying him, actually. And my ex-husband, who I'm still very good friends with, or I would not be mentioning him at all, was absolutely ha ha ha, I got her. But that doesn't mean he didn't love me, right?
Oh,
so I think it's very much for sure there's always that little bit of, you're an asshole, but I got the girl you were in love with.
Yeah, there's that, but there's also and we've talked about how Darrow realizes that Mustang isn't isn't using Cassius to get back at him, which is true. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We're this is honestly not really a spoiler. We're going to find out much later that Mustang has high standards. We're also going to find out a little bit more about anyway, but yeah. So there was a whole lot going on in that particular switching of partners that is not discussed in this book.
Yeah, there's definitely a whole section of like how Mustang, what Mustang is doing on Luna, and how Darrow trained with Lorne, and how Mustang ended up with Cassius. There's a whole lot where it's like, Pierce, please give us like the 100-page short story about all of these things
about that.
someday.
I mean, we get
after you finish the main series.
After you finish the main series, yeah. Now, I want to say I don't think it's in this book. I do think it's in another book. We get a little bit more about Mustang's motivations from Mustang as to why she was doing what she was doing. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, like, look, Darrow, how much is it? I don't know. I would feel a little bit of satisfaction in cutting Cassius's arm off too, if I were in Darrow's situation at that point.
And also feel a lot satisfaction in kind of laying some punishment on his entire family. Carnus, fucking asshole. Cagney, fucking asshole. Cassius's mother? What the fuck is wrong with this bitch?
Yeah, Cassius is the nice guy in the family.
Yeah, TM, nice guy TM.
Yeah.
But like his mother is awful. Actually, his dad is kind of just sitting back like, oh God, I don't know how to control it. So not that he's not a jerk, but he's also kind of like, whoa, what am I into here? Like when his wife is like, yeah, cut out his heart. Cassius's dad is like, take a step back, guys. We can't be doing this right here. So, oh, those Bolognas, man. But my Bologna.
Exactly. It just keeps happening in my head.
All right. Well, then we get to Severo, who like really wants to kill Augustus, but Darrow says, "No, boy, down, boy, bad." He doesn't really say that, but like he is very much like, "No, stop, don't do it."
Yeah.
And Severo tells Darrow, "You don't need his legitimacy. Haven't you figured us out yet? Here, you get what you take, no matter the right of it. You are 20 years old. If you win Mars, Darrow, you become a living god. And so when you reveal what you really are, you transcend color. Do I register?" And listen, he has good points there. But also, Darrow has it right when he thinks Severo has grown wiser since we first met. No doubt about that. But I fear he thinks too much of me. Apollo thought he was a god. Augustus thinks he is. A god is not what I should be. A god is something to serve, something to worship. I've never wanted that. Io never wanted that. Severo will have to learn. This is about freedom. Here you go, Jonathan. Yet it seems like everyone just wants to follow.
Well, it's easier.
Yeah.
It's easier. It is.
I mean, listen, Severo's not wrong. Augustus needs to die, but now ain't the time, my dude. But that's how Severo is. He's goblin.
He's very aggro. I would also point out that for a very high percentage of the people following Darrow and fighting for Darrow right now, it isn't about freedom. They don't know that it's about that. It's right now. It's about not getting killed by the other side. Yeah, exactly. And they think Darrow is the one to lead them to it, although not.
Yeah, I don't think they ever thought it was about freedom. I think it was about being on the winning side of the particular power dynamics that will control society.
Yeah. I mean, nobody ever slapped some blue paint on their face, rode a horse down to the battlefield, and yelled freedom at them.
Or
But the thing
you
is,
mean
they
from like in
have.
Avatar?
I was thinking Braveheart.
I know it was supposed to be Braveheart, but
Okay.
Avatar has the blue faces too.
Ooh, so angry.
I mean, but to be fair, they have all the real Earth history, right? They clearly do because they've got Roddenberry and Asgiliath and
Well, all of the when Darrow's name checking all of the great commanders of history, Alexander, Caesar, that guy, whatever that guy's name is.
He even named. Well, he at one point he even names. Oh my God, the kid from Ender's Game.
Wiggin.
Ender Wiggin, yeah.
Wiggin, yeah. He doesn't name Ender. He names his last name Wiggin. I was blanking on it, but yeah, he even names Wiggin at some point. So it's like, I think we're supposed to also believe that some of the sci-fi and fantasy from Earth might have been real too.
Or at least they got confused as to what was what.
Well, yeah.
Maybe that's why.
I don't agree with that because in Ender's Game there were aliens and there's no aliens. So I just think that was a homage to Orson Scott Card is what that was. It was not we're supposed to believe that.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I actually didn't think about that.
It would explain why people are afraid of aliens. Like we fought this giant race of bugs and we went to different galaxies and something happened.
Oh God, does that mean Starship Troopers is real?
That was the greatest movie ever.
Dude, Starship Troopers, the book has some issues, but it is a good book. The movie was something else.
The movie was great. It was one of the best satires I've ever seen.
Heinlein as an author has some issues.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, so does what the fuck is his name? Cthulhu.
Lovecraft?
Yeah, Lovecraft.
They all have person issues. Lovecraft?
Yes, yeah. Oh gosh. All right. So
my second grade teacher used to read us Lovecraft.
That's weird.
Second grade?
It was the greatest thing ever when I found out. Because when we were in second grade, we used to, if we were good and we had done our work, he would turn the lights down and.
Well, God, no wonder the Golds believe this shit is real.
Tell us these stories of Cthulhu's, and we were like scared shitless. And it wasn't until I got to like a junior in high school when a friend of mine handed me a Lovecraft book who was not in my second grade class and did not go to my elementary school. He moved to town later. And I start reading it and I was like, that son of a bitch. Because he never had a book in front of him. He was like telling these stories out of his head.
Oh, that is somebody who read way too much Lovecraft, way too
often. It was awesome. I'm sure today he'd be fired for it, but it's my greatest memory of elementary school.
Wow.
Well, I mean,
was being scared to death by Lovecraft.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't like all of the problematic stuff aside, which is a big all.
Yeah.
I wouldn't read Lovecraft stories in second grade. Look, I didn't start reading Lovecraft until I was in junior high or something like that. And even then, in junior high, I'm like, I am intellectually aware there is nothing actually in the dark.
Oh,
but
no.
When I turn off this light, I'm about 50% convinced that Nyarlathotep's going to reach out. I can only imagine what that would have been like had I been 8.
Yeah.
In second grade, it was more like 75%.
Oh my God.
Boy. It was wonderful.
I would like to know where that teacher went with his life after
Mom, where's our shining trapezohedron?
Oh,
Mr. Friedman.
Well,
see, that's another thing right there.
That's
right?
a very Jewish New York name. That could be like 800 people.
I know, but like it's like we all didn't find out until it was too late how insanely everythingist Lovecraft
Yes.
was. Like,
Yeah.
I remember I was at a con once, and like there was a game designer there who was like, yeah, Lovecraft was horribly racist and anti-Semitic and terrible. And somebody's like, what about his wife, Sonia Green? And dude's like, what about his wife? Because what Lovecraft apparently used to do was talk to his Jewish wife about how Zionism was destroying the world. They were married for 3 years, and I am amazed at that woman's patience.
I didn't even know he had a wife.
Yep.
Well, anyway, getting back to the subject at hand.
Yes,
We're
sorry.
going so long. Okay, so Golds believe that if they take a city by force, the city and everyone there is now their property and they deserve the spoils, which that's very much harkening back to Tactus at the Institute there. Like, But Darrow believes that if he can protect the city of Aegea, if he can show its people that there is a better breed of man, then maybe they can win Aegea's heart and be loved by those in it as he is loved by his army. I don't think he's entirely wrong, right? Like, the people of Aegea actually probably don't care who the fuck rules them at this point. They just don't want to be like raped and despoiled for, obvious fucking reasons. But then they let fall that iron rain, and whoa, things do not go as planned. Now, first, I just want to give a quick little RIP to Harpy. I know we don't get to know her very well, but she was one of the OG howlers from back at the Institute, and she dies in the Iron Rain.
Yeah.
So, RIP Harpy. And they land way too far out, and just 300 kilometers, man. Are you kidding me? I feel like this is like George R.R. Martin distances, honestly. Like, there's no need for that to have been that long. I get that they have technology. I get that they have grab foods, but like 300 kilometers, come on. I'm not saying whatever, maybe there's calculations, whatever. I don't care. I feel like saying it was 300 kilometers was hyperbole. Unnecessary.
Do we know how fast they can go with those grab boots? Because that is like, that is wild.
I assume they could go like 60, 70, 80 miles an hour on those ground boots.
It takes them a good bit to get from point A to point B.
That was my assumption.
Yes, I don't disagree. But also, I think that 300 kilometers was a bit much.
Yeah.
And then they get to Olympus, which is the, whatever it is. Ragnar went up in there and just cut down all of the golds that were there. There's no students. I do like how Darrow, when he realizes that all the students are gone, he was like, how weird it must be to like be in the midst of your year at the Institute and just be plucked up from fighting with like sticks and stones, with medieval weapons, basically, to be plucked up from that and be like, oh, back in society now. Sorry, we're in a war. Y'all haven't known about it because you've been in the Institute for X amount of months, but
yeah, killing each other and eating your friends.
Yeah, well, hopefully not that, because I think that was kind of a new thing for them when the jackal cannibalized.
That was not normal, but I have to imagine, that the jackal and company are not the only students in the centuries-long existence of the Institute to have resorted to cannibalism at some point. I imagine that is one of the things they try to keep a little bit quiet about what happens.
It might have been one of very few, or possibly the only time, where they actively killed a student who is still alive.
No, that's possible. Yeah.
That is possible. But last but not least, they get to the wall, they swim under it. And earlier, there was a very brief conversation between Severo and Darrow where Darrow was like, did you send the message? And Severo was like, I sent the message. Don't know if they got it. And it turns out that it was to be for the Sons of Ares to drill up through the ground beneath the river and bash out the bottom of the wall so they could like swim under it, or bash out the grates so they could swim under it. But that's kind of neither here nor there. They did what they were supposed to do. They get to the other side. Mustang has time to leave, go off to do her job, which is to take down the shields, which has to be like timed perfectly so that the sovereign doesn't escape and they can also do their other jobs. But the little brown girl, and I'm saying this with a capital B brown, she is a color brown girl, that is standing there on the river, like on the riverbed, like in the mud, and she has a picnic basket or whatever, and she reaches in and she takes something out, and it's this little globe. And this is so Cassius, who knows Darrow. He knew she would not, or he knew he would not allow that little girl to be shot. That's my take on that. He knew that they had to send somebody who was innocent.
Yeah, I mean,
I
their
thought the
timing
whole
on
thing
it,
scene
though,
was stupid.
their timing on it was magnificent that they managed to get her right there, just at that point,
Well,
when they didn't know about the holes in the wall.
yeah, my point was they didn't need the girl.
I think
Anyone could have done that, and they didn't even need to show the globe. They hit the button, and there you have the EMP pulse. It was just dumb.
It would look great on TV.
It would look great on TV, but it's a stupid plot line.
Yeah,
I mean,
contrivance.
I should say it's a stupid plot contrivance.
Like, are you telling me? Are you telling me really you can't put an EMP globe on a timer?
Well,
like
or a remote control or whatever. Yeah, it was just dumb.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. But I agree that a lot of
there's so much showmanship in this society, particularly among golds, and I think that's some of what that was.
There are also times, and I'm not necessarily
that's
talking
the benefit
about
of the doubt, Tara.
that I'm not talking about this time specifically, but there are times where it seems like Pierce Brown writes himself into a corner, and the only way he can get out is by making the other side do something that is so incredibly smart and well planned, even though they couldn't have predicted the timing. Oh, this is going to get talked about later on.
Or even where they would come from, honestly.
Yeah,
there was something they knew. There was something they knew. That's simply what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's...
Yeah. And on that note, I mean, any last thoughts on...
So we will end this episode on one of the stupidest moments of the series.
I don't know if I can call it that, but it's contrived. I won't disagree with that.
Yeah.
For several reasons. Well, as we close out this episode, we just want to give a shout out to our Heroes Tier patron, Tommy of the TKOK Podcast Network. Thank you so much for supporting us. Once again, I'm Tara, along with fellow host Jonathan and practically permanent host Seth. Don't forget, you can always hit us up at Sagas and Sass on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube, or email us at sagasandsass@gmail.com with any comments or thoughts you may have. Thank you for joining us for Sagas and Sass. We will be back on Wednesday, December 14th to cover part 4 of Golden Sun. Bye.
Good night.
Bye.